Again I remembered the thrifty and far-sighted Okremenko, looked reproachfully at the petty officer and warned him to have a constant supply of grenades, cartridges and bottles of flammable liquid at his disposal. One bottle with flammable liquid KC was given to each fighter, but I feared that they would not protect them before a possible meeting with Nazi tanks. I did not forget about such a possibility. In my memory, I often remembered pictures of deadly single combat between infantrymen and fascist tanks in the battles in Smolensk. I remembered how Okremenko's vials helped our company. Now we had bottles filled with a special combustible mixture that ignited on air. The first time I saw such a bottle and tested it, I demanded to keep them as the apple of my eye. However, I instructed Sankin to collect more empty bottles at the first opportunity and fill them with trophy gasoline. In a difficult moment, and homemade means will come in handy if we have to burn out the fascists from hiding places. This will save the bottles with KC to meet with tanks and armoured vehicles. The fact that Sankin did not understand the importance of the assignment given to him, I was saddened. I discreetly told him about it and caught myself thinking that I was constantly comparing the company petty officer with Okremenko, to whom, as they call it, my heart was attached. Apparently, is the human being. Everything is known to them in comparison. Reports of platoon commanders confirmed that to move forward is possible only after the Germans will be knocked out of the stone buildings on both sides of the street. I warned the platoon commanders not to linger at the small buildings. Let the fascists continue to sit back. They will be finished off by the sailors who remain in the city. Our task is to break through to Bald Mountain as soon as possible. To fight in the city in platoons on the ship were created assault groups, in which we included, in addition to riflemen and machine gunners, a sapper with a supply of explosives and a fighter with a satchel flamethrower. In my reserve remained the squad of Sergeant Malishko. I was deeply sympathetic to this phlegmatic bogatier, who in a moment of extreme danger transformed, became impetuous and agile. In addition, the course of battle I could influence the fire of 2 machine guns and attach to the company battalion mortars. Having given the signal to attack, together with the reserve moving along the street that leads to the highway to the old Crimea, bullets swarming around us made us recoil. The shelling stopped as suddenly as it had begun, and then we heard the thud of engine and saw a car running at top speed. When the black car came close to us, Malishko threw a grenade with such force that it broke through the windshield and exploded inside. The engine roared. The car jumped and crashed into the nearest building. Smoke shrouded it, but the nimble Grisha Avdiyev, having opened the back door, took out of the car a black shiny briefcase with a dead German major. They tried to open the briefcase and it was locked. Malishko tried to tear it open. I didn't allow it and ordered to take the briefcase to the battalion headquarters. Above us low passed 6 German dive bombers accompanied by fighters. Well, now it will begin, I thought with sadness, looking into the grey, unfriendly sky. From the side of the harbour I heard the methodical ahani of the ship's anti-aircraft guns, drowned out by the bursts of aerial bombs. It became alarming for the transport ships. Suddenly, in the buildings adjoining the street, there was a firefight, grenade bursts, broken glass rang out, fierce cries in German, Russian, and Ukrainian were heard. It was Ukraintsev's and Emilyanov's platoons who were fighting. We are slowly moving through the courtyards, with difficulty dragging mortars and machine guns through the fences. The soldiers are combing every house. Not a living soul in the rooms. Only in some cellars hid frightened women, children and old people. The boys were the first to be bold. They looked at the weapons with curiosity. Malishko pulled out a cloth bag from behind his back, took out a blackened lump of sugar, and handed it to a black-eyed boy of about 11, shivering from the cold. Grabbing the sugar like a squirrel's dainty, the boy bounced away, then pulled Malishko by the hem of his overcoat. "Where are you from, uncle?" "We fell from the sky," smiles Malishko. "No," disagrees the boy. "We came by sea. I heard the ship's cannons boom and the house shook." Sneaky boys were busily collecting German rifles and dragging them somewhere. Again Sankin won't get anything, I thought, and, calling one of them over, I said, "Here is what, my friend, announced to all the guys. Whoever finds a petty officer of our company, his name is Sankin and gives him a German rifle with ammunition, will get a piece of sugar, for a machine gun, 3 times as much. Tell the petty officer, the company commander ordered it." Uncle, I have a machine gun. I took it from the room where the officer lived." I looked at the boy carefully. On a pale face, Round as a sunflower with a funny little upturned nose, shone mischievous blue eyes. Here is a shooter, I thought, looking over the thin, stem-like figure, not afraid to snatch a weapon from under the very nose of the fascist. Boy, I asked the desperate lad, what is your name? Miss US, Petke. So that's what it is, Petka. I respect bravery, but please don't take any more risks. What kind of boy is she to you, uncle? Giggled the boy, fixing the huge cap that was slipping down over his eyes. She is a real girl, though she is called Petika. Really? I was sincerely surprised. Peteka and a girl? Are you really a girl? Guess. Petka twisted coquettishly on one leg. By this elusive coquetry and the slight blush on his pale cheeks, I realized that I was really a girl. What a number! I laughed and hugged her affectionately. So our petty officer had volunteer helpers in the Obro trophy weapons and ammunition. Nothing escaped their keen eye. We went to the street crossing our path and came across a group of fighters, crouching near a stone wall. They were smoking a cigarette, passing it from hand to hand. Where is the commander? There, in the house. May pointed to a 2-story building Red Army soldier, whose last name I could not remember. I caught Emily enough in a room on the 2nd floor. He and the sergeants sheltered in the window openings, cautiously looking at the opposite side of the street. The Germans are firing heavy rifle and machine gun fire. Bullets with a whistle fly into the open windows. Why did you stop, Comrade Junior Lieutenant? I asked quietly, standing behind Emelyanov, who is engrossed in the observation. He slowly turns his head and calmly answers. You see, Comrade Komroti, what a nuisance. At the crossroads is a pillbox, one of whose embrasures looks in our direction. Machine gun fire penetrates every inch of the street. The buildings on the opposite side are barricaded by riflemen. We could handle them, but how do we cross the street under machine gun fire? That's the problem. Ivan Vasilievich takes off his hat, smooths his sparse, light and soft, like a child hair, sighs heavily. Your decision. What decision can there be? Exclaims Emelyanov with undisguised despair. Let's swing over the fence and hooray to the other side, and there we'll show the Krauts. He waves his fist threateningly. No, I'm not saying that. It's unlikely that half the platoon will be able to run across the street. What shall we do? Ivan Vasilievich looks at me confused. How to get close to the pillbox? Without answering his question, I listen attentively to the gunfire coming from the embankment. The fight on the embankment is going on somewhere up ahead, I ponder. Can't we take advantage of this to bypass the fascists along the embankment and attack from the rear? My thoughts were interrupted by the smoky voice of Sergeant Gariv. Now, Comrade Komrati, here before you a boy breaks through. He says that he has to report to the chief about an important matter. Where is he? Near. In the half-dark hallway, I could hardly make out a boy in a quilted jacket and a cap. What do you want, buddy? Uncle Commander, I've studied all the yards here like my own. I'll lead you to the houses on the other side so inconspicuously that no fascist will ever guess. You don't believe me, he asked. Honest pioneer's word. I believe, my friend, but you're too young to be put under bullets. I'll be 15 soon, he said proudly, clearly adding 2 or 3 years to his age, no less. I went to sea with my father. Where's your father? In the partisans. All our men are fighting, some in the Red Army, some in the partisans, but only we, he poked himself in the chest, remained Iowa. They do not trust. What's your name, little man? I asked, holding back a smile. Ostap T. Ostap, Mykolaish Motiny. All right, Ostap Mykolaish. I decided, ye show me the way. But I'll make a deal. When they start shooting, hide at once. Yes, hide at once. The boy raised his hand in a pioneer salute, and for the first time his bloodless lips opened in a smile. I entrusted Malishko's squad to go to the rear of the fascists, reinforcing it with an assault group from Emelyanov's platoon. We agreed. As soon as Malishko's group manages to reach Delhi, he will release a red rocket. On this signal, we will open fire from all available means and divert Hitlerites' attention to ourselves. I'm with them, Alexander Terentievich, shouted Mitrofan Vasilievich, catching up with the group. I ask you to stay, Mitrofan Vasilievich. You are needed here. Seeing that he hesitated, he added, one Komsorg is enough there. With apparent reluctance, Mitrofan Vasilievich turns back. Meanwhile, Malishko, having thrown his men and the boy over a 2-meter-high stone wall with lightning speed, overcomes it himself with surprising ease for his heavy figure. Together with Emelianov, I choose the most convenient places for machine guns and arrange the soldiers so that all the firing points on the opposite side of the street were under fire. Having taken aim at the places from where the fascists could fire, the fighters began to shoot slowly. And what began here? The Germans were shooting from the windows from cracks that we had not noticed. In the room where Emelianov and I were, there was a veil of dust from the pulverized plaster. We were unable to look out of the window aperture even for a second. The liaisons I had sent to Tereshin in the 2nd Platoon and Ukraintsev in the 1st returned. They brought disappointing news. The pillbox at the crossroads was in the way, like a bone stuck in my throat. All attempts to get close to it are stopped by fire from the nearest buildings. Now hope for Malishko's group. The minutes of waiting seemed long. Finally, a panting observer burst into the room, and, not recognizing me in the semi-darkness, shouted excitedly, "Fainty red rocket!" I rushed to the machine gun and, pushing the machine gunner away, gave a long line signal at the window opposite. The Red Army opened such a hurricane, and most importantly purposeful shooting, that the Nazi fire weakened sharply. Soon in the opposing house heard the deafening bursts of grenades. Suddenly, from the top floor of the junk that was blocking the window, the fascist flew out with a desperate cry, and in the window a terrible bloody face of Malishko appeared. He waved his fist belligerently and disappeared. For some time on the opposite side of the gunfire was heard. Occasionally grenades burst. Then everything quieted down. Now we have to destroy the pillbox. The fascists are still pouring lead rain down on the streets from there. If we had smoke bombs, we could try to cross the street under the cover of a smokescreen. I expressed this idea to Emelianov. He disappeared somewhere, then called me into the courtyard. I came out and immediately coughed from the black smoky stench. "What's wrong? What's burning?" I was worried. Fritz tires," Ivan Vasilievich explained satisfactorily. Wiping my watery eyes, I counted 4 fires on which the rubber was smouldering. "Everything is clear." Ivan Vasilievich decided to use them instead of smoke bombs. Emelianov waved to the soldiers. They, wrapping their hands in wet rags, rolled the burning tires to the gate, forcefully pushed them out into the street. Gusts of wind prevented the smoke from rising up, and it, spreading over the sidewalk, quickly reached the crossroads. The Nazi machine gunners continued to fire at random. I was the first to crawl along the sidewalk, almost touching it with my cheek. Someone overtook me on the right. Someone screamed fearfully behind me, but soon the whole platoon of EMF was already on the opposite side. Only one soldier was slightly scratched by a bullet. Malishko and his young guide were walking towards me. "Merci, comrade. The mission has been accomplished." What he reported next, I didn't catch. My attention was focused on his blood-spattered cap. "What's wrong with you, Comrade Malishko? Are you wounded?" "No." "Why?" "You're covered in blood." The astonished hero ran his hands over his face, looked at his palms and staggered. I barely had time to pick him up, helped him to waddle to the wall of the house and fall to the ground. He smiled guiltily. "Since childhood I can't stand the sight of blood. It makes me sick." Petain. Peating. Get Peatime." I shouted impatiently, not knowing yet how seriously Malishko was wounded. Waddling like a duck, Petin came running up, silently pointing at Malishko. San instructor pulled out of his bag a bottle with some liquid, wet a cotton swab and, taking off the wounded cap, wiped his face. While he was groping his head and chest, Malishko's face was again covered with drops of blood, apparently oozing from numerous scratches. Petin began to dab them thickly with iodine and suddenly flew into the air, rapidly jumping up. Malishko high, lifted by the scruff of the legs, jerking San instructor, and growled angrily. "Are you kidding me? Are you skinning a living man?" What are you, Comrade Sergeant?" babbled the frightened Petin. "It's for disinfection, so that blood poisoning doesn't happen." I couldn't help laughing, and with difficulty pulled Petin out of Malishko's hands and lowered him to the ground, after which the company Escalapist did not hesitate to disappear. Mitrofan Vasilievich came up and looked surprised at Petin, who was hastily fleeing. I told him about the incident. "What a hero," grinned the politruk, "and we painted him like that." He handed me a sheet of paper, where quite skillfully with a black pencil was sketched out a drawing. a formidable face of the sergeant in the window, and in the air spread out a frightened, screaming fascist, thrown out of the window, and the caption, "This is how Sergeant Malishko deals with fascists. Beat them, damn them, and at the tops, read it and pass it on to your comrade." That's right, I confirmed it. Let everyone look at it. Suddenly Lieutenant Soloviev, with whom we had never had time to celebrate his birthday, appeared in the yard. Seeing me, Veniamin shouted, "Combat is not satisfied with your trampling on the spot. The 7th Company overtook yours and the 9th for a kilometre." When I explained the reason for the delay, Soloviev businesslike asked, "What do you intend to do?" "Tell the commander that Emelianov's platoon will immediately develop success, and I with my reserve will finish off the garrison of the pillbox and clear the way for the other platoons." "All right, I'll report to the commander," shouted the chief staff. "Good luck to you." The polytruck left with Emelianov's platoon, and I with Malishko and a sapper tried to skip the crossroads to approach the pillbox from the rear. As soon as we stuck our heads out, bullets clattered around us. It became clear that unless we knocked out the fascists from the rooms with windows facing the crossroads, we would not be able to approach the pillbox. I silently looked at Malishko. Having understood me, the hero waved to his squad. Having divided it into groups of 3 people, he in his usual manner, more by gestures than words, indicated the direction of movement of each group and promptly ran across the street. Too late I discovered that Ostap was not a step behind Malishko. I shouted for him to come back, but the boy pretended not to hear. Fortunately, he safely skipped down the street that was being shot at. Soon there was shooting in the house, grenade explosions, and then Malishko appeared, as always unperturbed, accompanied by the boy and a Red Army soldier, even from afar, raising his huge fist in the popular pre-war greeting Roth front. "Order. Where are the others?" I was worried. "There." He waved his hand in the direction of the building, guarding so that the Krauts would not interfere with us. "Are you Ostap Mikhailich, breaking discipline?" Trying to make a stern face, I asked the shining and proud boy. "No," he said, embarrassed. "I'm not." "Why didn't you come back? I ordered you to." I didn't hear. There was a lot of noise. "And if you're an honest pioneer..." Chip's appealed cheeks turned pink, and he looked down at me with a sly look. Thing, I heard it, but I was afraid to go back. The street was shot through. "All right," I concluded. "Keep a low profile. Watch the fence and report back if you notice anything. Here's a pair of binoculars." "Yes, watch and keep your head down, Comrade Commander." Ustap readily stretched out, trying to spread his narrow shoulders wide. The machine gunners, as if anticipating their last minutes, were ceaselessly firing. Only from the rear, where the entrance was, there was no embrasure. Taking advantage of this, we rushed to the pillbox. Malishko runs, easily holding a heavy explosive charge in one hand, a grenade in the other. I have 2 grenades at the ready. Malishko carefully puts the explosives under the door. The sapper attaches the Bigfoot cord to it. Here it caught fire, and we, having run away to a safe distance, cling to the ground. There is throwing a grenade into the opened door. Malishko and I squeeze inside the pillbox. Malishko immediately, staggering, turns back. Looking closely, I see bloody corpses on the floor and hurry to the exit. We are surrounded by excited soldiers of the 2nd platoon. Someone shouted in Joe. "Swing the company commander." And only my stern shout stops the soldiers. Parting, they let Senior Sergeant Tereshin, glittering mischievous brown eyes. He reports that in the platoon wounded and sent to the infirmary fighter Shabanov. "Where is Ukraintsev's platoon?" "Finishing the Krauts in distant houses." "Did Lieutenant Stupitsyn go to Ukraintsev's platoon?" "I don't know. I haven't seen him since the landing." "I sent him to you and to the 1st platoon." "Probably. He went straight to the 1st platoon to Ukraintsev. Yui Tereshin tries to calm me down." "Maybe. I agree. But I think... What could have happened to him?" I ordered Tereshin to move up the main street and 1 department to send to inspect the yards, whether the surviving fascists are not hidden somewhere. I myself, with Malishko's squad, went to search for the 1st platoon. I approached Malishko, who was standing sullenly alone, and touched his shoulder. He turned to me, and in his dimmed eyes I saw such pain and disgust at what was happening that I involuntarily flashed the thought, what a light-hearted soul this giant has. I ordered Pete in to help the wounded Krauts to send to the infirmary. Malishko nodded and silently followed me, next to Ostap, whose existence I had forgotten. Comrade Commander, he reported. The task is completed now and is not noticed. What to do with the boy? How to bring him home? After all, now he will not leave the company and will jump on a stray bullet, I pondered, scrutinizing his old clothes. And then I had a saving idea. Now, Comrade Motony, I said, we didn't have time to clean the city properly, and the fascists could be lurking somewhere. I appoint you commandant of the area, the boundaries of which are 1/2 kilometer around your house. Gather the boys and carefully scout the whole area. If you find fascists, immediately report to the military commandant who you'll find in the port. Is the task clear? Clear, Comrade Commander, exclaimed Ostap and opened his jacket so that his pioneer tie was visible. Giving him an old binoculars as a souvenir, I got a brand new Zeiss's one in the battle. I fondly pressed the boy's head to my chest, then, gently pulling him away, I ordered, carry out your mission. Yes, carry out the task, Ostap exclaimed and, ineptly turning over his right shoulder, walked down the street. Oi, boys, boys, boys. The damned fascists deprived you of a happy childhood. You should be sitting at desks now, not in cold cellars. Cautiously, we move along the street parallel to the one on which the pillbox stands. At 11 o'clock in the morning, we finally caught up with Lieutenant Ukraintsev's platoon. Even from a distance, I saw the broad-shouldered figure of the commander behind a group of fighters, walking warily with weapons at the ready. On the other side of the street, the second group was moving. There was silence all around. I called Ukraintsev. He stopped the platoon. The men instantly jumped over the low stone hedges and began to scrutinize the surrounding yards. The platoon continues to advance along the planned route. Mir reported Ukraintsev. We eliminated a fortified stronghold, which was difficult to bypass. 18 fascists were destroyed, 6 surrendered. On our side, Red Army man Lebedev was killed. Lightly wounded Budkin remained in the line. Did you have Lieutenant Stupitsin? No, he wasn't. Ukraintsev's answer puzzled me. Where did my combat deputy disappear to? Is he dead? And if wounded, is lying in some yard and waiting for help? What to do? I ordered Ukraintsev to send fighters to scour all the yards and streets up to the crossroads where the pillbox is located. If the lieutenant is wounded, then only in this neighborhood. Ukraintsev allocated 2 Red Army soldiers. I explained them the task, after the fulfillment of which they should arrive at the church. Looking after the departing soldiers, where are the prisoners? We disarmed them. I ordered them to hold a white cloth on a stick in front of them and to move in formation to the port. No time to waste with them. Shrugged his shoulders Ukraintsev, noticing that I frowned angrily. Why are you walking down the street as if you were taking a walk? What if there's an ambush in some yard? Everything is provided for, the lieutenant objected calmly. The yards and buildings adjacent to the street are checked by my patrols. In suspicious places where fascists may be lurking, we delay and thoroughly inspect everything around. I say goodbye to Ukraintsev and order him, as soon as he gets to the highway leading to the highway to the old Crimea, to send a contact to the church for further instructions. Clearing quarter after quarter, the company is advancing to the northeastern outskirts of the city. Such a stubborn and organized resistance, as at the crossroads at the pillbox, we have not met anywhere else. As always, the commander and commissar of the battalion suddenly appeared. The handsome, strong-willed face of Captain Nikolayenko looked lively and good-natured. Having heard the report on the progress of the offensive, he rubbed his hands with satisfaction. Well done. Well done. Way to go. Well, what can I do for you? Hearing my constant request for ammunition, grenades and bottles with fuel mixture, he said reproachfully. What do I have? My own factory. Ammunition transports have not unloaded yet. There is a small reserve and the offensive is long. What if the unloading of ammunition will be delayed? However, saying goodbye, he softened. All right, I'll send you a box or 2 of ammunition and 3 dozen grenades. But look, he wagged his finger. Take care of the ammunition, don't waste it. Seen returning from Emilanov's platoon, Mitrofan Vasilevich, with admiration tells how bravely the soldiers of the 3rd platoon acted. Finally, Lieutenant Stupitsin was found. Seeing him alive and unharmed, I smiled at first, but remembering that the fighters were sent to search for him, Where did you disappear, Comrade Lieutenant? Why were you not in Tereshin's and Ukraintsev's platoons? It was impossible to pass, Comrade Komroti. The streets were being shot through, and when the shooting was over, I lost track of both platoons. In the lieutenant's voice, I could not feel even a shadow of embarrassment. I gasped with indignation. With difficulty restraining myself, I warned, emphasizing every... Remember, Lieutenant, if such a case of cowardice is repeated, you will go to the tribunal. Yes, it's not cowardice. Next, Utersin blushed and objected, but a manifestation of caution, a natural, so to speak, sense of self-preservation inherent in every normal person. Do you need me dead? I don't need you dead. I exploded. Mitrofan Vasilevich, who was listening attentively to our conversation, pulled Stupitsin by the button of his overcoat and, rising on his toes, looked intently into his eyes. Then he pushed the lieutenant away and said with undisguised mockery, "Remember, Lieutenant Stupitsin, caution and cowardice are different concepts. Try not to confuse." The spat with the deputy left an unpleasant residue. Later on, I met him less, passed orders through others, and entrusted him, together with the petty officer, to take care of the soldiers' food, ammunition, delivery of the wounded to the infirmary, and burial of the killed. Moving from one neighborhood to another, the fighters sometimes came across small groups of soldiers or police. Instead of using a part of the forces to eliminate them, the whole assault group was thrown into the attack. These delayed the advance. Nevertheless, by noon, the platoons of Tereshin and Imeyanov made their way to the church towering above the town, surrounded by a stone fence. The approaches to the church were shot through with rifle and machine gun fire. While Mitrofan Vasilevich and I were trying to find out the situation, I was tracked down by a messenger from Captain Nikolayenko. He escorted me to the command. "By the way, Lieutenant," when the captain saw me, he exclaimed, "no unfortunate delay." Noticing that I was surprised to see elderly men in civilian clothes, Nikolayenko explained, "These are local comrades. They helped us to reveal the system of circular defense of the church. Behind its fence hid considerable forces. The task is complicated by the fact that on the territory of the church there are also prisoners of war. They must not be harmed. Having consulted with my comrades, Nikolayenko nodded at the locals. I decided to attack the church together with the units of the 1st Battalion. You, Lieutenant, will start the attack and divert the garrison's attention to yourself. As soon as the battle heats up, the main forces, which will secretly concentrate in the gardens adjacent to the church, will attack the enemy from the opposite side." After a silence, the captain asked, "Have you understood the idea and purpose of your attack?" "For the demonstration of the attack, the company will pay with the lives of soldiers and commanders. But what to do? Someone must fulfill this task." Suppressing doubts, answered as firmly as possible, "Your plan and the company's task is clear. When is the beginning of the attack?" "At your disposal 40 minutes. 5 minutes before the attack on the territory of the church, we'll open fire all battalion mortars." Major Andreev and Battalion Commissar Trofimov swiftly entered the room. Nikolayenko jumped up, began to report on the situation, but the regimental commander interrupted him. "What are you, Captain, for the night camped near the church? Why don't you attack?" "We tried to attack from the get-go, Comrade Major, but the fire system is very well organized. Every inch of land is shot, especially rampant machine guns mounted on the bell tower. With Captain Bazinski, we have worked out a plan of joint action." "When is the beginning of the attack?" Andreev asked. "Combat called the time. Major promised to send the regimental cannon. It will help to knock machine guns from the bell tower." I returned to the positions occupied by the company and gladly learned that Ukraintsev's platoon had arrived. So I looked carefully at the terrain. On the opposite side of the street stands a church fence, covered by a powerful fire barrier. It seems impregnable. Gradually the plan of attack, its details. I gather the platoon commanders, briefly explain to them the situation, set tasks, specify the direction of attack of each platoon, and demand to make as much noise as possible. To shoot, to shout hurrah louder and more often, but if possible to avoid getting under the bullets. As soon as the Nazi machine guns concentrate fire on the company, I explained, take cover, and as soon as they fall silent, move forward with a loud hurrah. Suddenly I saw Petty Officer Sankin with a bunch of city boys. What is it?" I was surprised. "Not Comrade Comrade. The ataman of this gang reported that you instructed them to help me in collecting trophy weapons and ammunition. They worked hard, a whole mountain of German rifles, cartridges, and even 2 machine guns brought, and now in the neighboring yards found 6 ladders. I think the ladders will be useful to us. They will help us to climb over the fence." Well done. I could not resist and praised, although I was just about to scold the petty officer for allowing the boys in the area of hostilities. Now take them away immediately and occupy them with some safe-for-life activity. The ladders found by the boys, Sankin distributed to the platoons. When a red rocket flew into the air, the fighters opened frantic fire. Malishko's trumpet voice was heard. Like a fuse in a powerful charge, it caused an explosion of a mighty rolling hurrah. This thunderous boom for a moment drowned out the fierce fire from behind the church fence. Never had I realized that 100 human throats could raise such a deafening roar. Twice the platoons rose to the attack and crawled back into cover as the machine guns concentrated their fire on them. The artillerymen nailed the openings of the bell tower, where the Nazi machine gunners had taken refuge, but could not hit the target. After the second attack, during a short respite, near me appeared Captain Nikolayenko. Many losses in the company. Having learned that 3 soldiers got off with minor scratches, the commander sighed with relief. Good. We have to finish here faster. The main forces of the regiment already go to the northeastern outskirts. After the capture of the brickyard will be a decisive attack Bald Mountain. Until we capture it, the city can't be considered liberated. Do you have the mines? 6 left, 3 per barrel, I answered. Come on, Lieutenant. The last mines on the fascists, and into the attack. Decisively waved his hand Nikolayenko. I passed the command to the mortars. Fire. When the platoons for the third time rose to the attack, the fire from the church suddenly abruptly weakened, and behind the fence heard grenade explosions and frequent firing, drowned out by a powerful hurrah. At last, I sighed with relief and, swinging my rifle, rushed to the wall. Behind me runs Malishko with his fighters. He holds the ladder with one hand. While Malishko is fixing it to the wall, I throw off my overcoat and throw it over the barbed wire stretched over the fence. Malishko is climbing the ladder, which is sagging under his weight, threatening to break every second, grasping the tightly stretched wire with his hands. Malishko swings over the fence. Hurry after him, and I see that Malishko is attacked by 3 fascists, holding the barrel of a handheld machine gun, the sergeant with his other hand grasped by the scruff of a shrieking fascist and is covered by him like a shield, jumping. My appearance distracts the attention of enemy soldiers. Taking advantage of this, Malishko suddenly throws a fascist and, waving a machine gun, treats the butt of the others. The fascists retreat to the church. Malishko pursues them like a bear. He glimpsed at the Hitlerite defeated by his terrible blow and shuddered. His head was not visible, as if the helmet was placed directly on his shoulders. More and more fighters of the company are included in the fight that broke out on the territory of the church. Among them I see Sergeant Sankin, wielding a German rifle with a dagger bayonet, and he, it turns out, is brave, I thought, with a feeling of suddenly bursting sympathy for my silent and not enough, as it seemed to me, initiative petty officer. Fearing that the unkilled fascists would hide behind the thick walls of the church, I shouted to Emyanov to make his way to the entrance with his men. We crash into the thick of the melee. Fascists fiercely fought back. The desire to get to the church doors as soon as possible, as I noticed, arose not only for me. Several groups are making their way there from different sides. The closer one gets to the entrance, the more difficult each step is. Sergeants Gariev, Gretchen, Kyrov grouped around me with their squads. Emyanov is not lagging behind me. He shoots sparingly, aiming carefully and for some reason holding the revolver. His face is remarkably calm. Only once he turned pale-lated, baronated, threw sideways at Sergeant Kyrov. Gutting and Mayanov, falsetto-sounded excited voice Emelianov. Look out, almost without aiming. Ivan Vasilievich shot at the fascist. The bullet apparently burned his cheek. This slowed the blow and Kyrov had time to deflect. Almost at the very church doors, on the porch, fiercely resisted a group of tall Hitlerites. Dense ring, they surrounded the officer and repelled the attackers. I never understood why suddenly Ivan Vasilievich was in front, feeling that he was tumbling over me. I ducked down and tried to support him, and thanks to that I was saved. The first bullet fired by the officer hit Ivan Vasilievich's head, and the other 2 bullets whistled over my head. I cautiously supported the junior lieutenant, and the enraged fighters instantly crushed the fascists and raised the officer on bayonet. With pain in my heart, I look at Emelianov. His eyes, staring into the low winter sky, twitched. His face had the usual expression of calm business-likeness. Sergeant Gariv runs up, lifts the body of his commander, carefully places it on the... I joined the soldiers trying to open the massive church door. 4 burly Red Army soldiers, led by Botchkov, brought a log from somewhere. Dozens of hands picked it up, and powerful blows fell on the door. After a few blows it swung open. Our eyes are fixed on the dark recess of the church, from which for some reason no one appears. We can't stand it and rush to the entrance, but suddenly we stop like stumbling blocks. The prisoners of war are slowly crawling out of the darkness. The sight of them is horrible, skeletons wrapped in rags. The battle is over. Faces of soldiers and commanders, illuminated by the joy of victory. At the sight of living skeletons gloomy. Botchkov suddenly can't stand it, resolutely throws off his overcoat and throws it over the shoulders of a blue-eyed, shivering, grey-headed man. Sniffing his nose, he says affectionately, "Take cover, grandfather, or you'll give your soul to God, and freedom is not freedom to you." "What kind of grandfather am I to you?" the grey-haired man objected grudgingly, not getting a tooth on a tooth. "I'm only 33 years old. Whoa, take the shy Nell, you'll find out for yourself." "No, sorry, brother," said Botchkov, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to offend you. It was a misfire. I didn't look closely. If I fed you, you'd show the fascists the mother lode." Give me the gun." The prisoner of war moaned, choked, sank to the ground and cried at the realization of his powerlessness. Botchkov easily lifted him off the ground. "Don't hurry, brother," he said compassionately. "Gain a little strength, heal up, and then come to our aid." We had to hurry to Bald Mountain. Being afraid that the sergeant would go to the battle in only one overcoat, I ordered the soldiers to take off overcoats from the killed, as well as from the captured fascists, and distribute them to the freed men. "Listen and think about it, Lieutenant," said Nikolayenko, familiarizing me with the general plan of the assault on Bald Mountain. So the regiment commander approved the following plan of further actions. All battalions concentrate at Bald Mountain, and on the signal, a series of green rockets amicably attack the lower tier of enemy trenches. At this time, one of the battalions of the 716th Regiment will try to bypass the mountain on the right and hit the flank and rear of the fascists from the northeast. It is necessary to divert the attention of the fascists from the main forces and from the west. The regiment commander assigned this task to our battalion. "Your company will attack on the left flank, Lieutenant. You must not only provide us with an open flank, but also contribute to the success of the attack. Act according to the situation, but as actively as possible. Move out immediately." Winding through narrow streets and alleys, the 8th Company approaches the northern outskirts of the city. Fierce gunfire is becoming more and more audible. It seems that the Krauts are still holding the brickyard. Year suggests Mitrofan Vasilievich. I nod affirmatively and figure that if the factory in the hands of the Germans, the company must prepare for battle. I tell this to the political officer. "Maybe we'll bypass the factory and go straight to the mountain." He suggests it. "Bypass will take too much time. I object. We may be late. Besides, as long as the plant is in the hands of the Germans, the regiment won't be able to attack Bald Mountain." We decided to move towards the brickyard. No sooner had we passed one of the outermost dwelling houses than a thin man in a cloth jacket suddenly turned out from behind the corner. Slightly limping, he ran up to us and with a joyful smile said, "Oh, comrades, I am a partisan. Our detachment was ambushed 8 days ago. Only 3, including me, managed to fight back. I am a local resident. I know all the ways and exits. I can lead you to any place in such ways that no fascist viper will not smell." I hesitated. What if this is a provocateur sent by the fascists? My suspicious look confused the stranger. Worried, he said that his weapons and documents were hidden nearby. We could check the veracity of his words. "Show me." I decisively waved my hand, meeting Mitrofan Vasilievich's approving gaze. The man led us to the catch, took out a German automatic rifle, a stock of ammunition and a dozen grenades. Carefully unfolding a piece of oilcloth, he presented a Soviet passport and a sheet enclosed in it, which certified that the bearer of this, a fighter of a partisan unit. I shook his hand firmly and told him that the company was going to the brick factory. After capturing it, it would advance to Bald Hill. "Listen, comrade commander, pleased partisan. Ravines, we can discreetly approach the brick factory and hit the Germans from the rear." I liked the proposal. We send forward a sentinel, themselves stealthily moving behind, ready for any surprise. Partisan really well oriented in the labyrinth of ravines. We looped for a long time, hearing gunfire from the front, then from the right. Finally, a Red Army soldier came running from the senior patrol and anxiously reported, "Not comrade, comrade. The crowds are near." Comrade Sergeant asked what to do. Having deployed the company, Abramenko and I moved to the sentry. Sergeant Golovanov, the watch commander, whispered to the Krauts hand in hand. Cautiously leaning out of the ravine, I saw squat factory buildings, between which scattered stacks of red bricks. The attention of the fascists is focused on the paratroopers. Half-circle embraced the territory of the factory. The attackers are slowly but steadily approaching. I understand that they are preparing for a decisive throw. We must help. Having pulled up the platoons, Mitrofan Vasilevich and I almost simultaneously rush down to the factory buildings. We run and hear the heavy stomping of soldiers' boots behind us. Mitrofan Vasilevich shouted loudly and loud, "Hurrah, or!" His call echoed around. Not expecting an attack from the rear, the fascists scattered. Some of them turned their weapons in our direction. Bullets whistled around, but it was too late. We were already at the factory walls, and paratroopers attacking from the front were running towards the factory at full height. The fight is already going on inside the shops. The fascists are desperately resisting. Noticing that a significant group of Hitlerites is retreating to the residential houses, I gather soldiers of my company and under the command of Ukraintsev, I send them after the retreating. Few Hitlerites managed to get away. The firefight was not over yet, and the inhabitants of the village had already rushed out of the shelters. Here are furious women dragging a soldier who tried to hide in the attic. A bony, broad-faced woman holds a machine gun. "Take Trotsky, comrade commander, fool," she says, bowing at the waist. "This is instead of bread and salt, because we have neither of them. The Germans ate everything." When I took the machine gun, the woman put her strong arms around my neck and kissed me 3 times. "Now, for all our women, I thank you, Falcon, and bow low." A tall, slender brunette with a cheerful smile shouted, "Why did you, Marika, for all of us decided to kiss Oslobonitili? Can't we, women? Well, grab them, our heroes." With these words, she grabbed Grisha Avdiev and lifted above the ground, kissed firmly on both cheeks. "Now thank you, sons, that you have not forgotten about us," reverently exclaimed and gently lowered the embarrassed, flushed Kamsorga. Women with joyful smiles, with tears in their eyes, kissed the soldiers. From everywhere heard laughter, joking remarks. Having pushed the crowd, in the middle burst into the low Mujikonka and crying voice shouts, "Comrade Commander, do God's mercy help me. My grandmother was frightened into labor. She's screaming in a frantic voice. She might die herself and kill the child. Help me, for Christ's sake." "How can I help you? I don't know anything about these things," asked a woman. "There's nothing to help her," shouted angrily a thin woman, whose grey hair fell from under her kerchief to her forehead. His Katraya was tangling with the Germans. Let the Germanic spawn die in her womb. "Well, you, Aunt Stepanida, say so." The woman who had handed me the machine gun said sternly, "A baby is not a kitten. After all, the Germans came to us not 9, but only 3 months ago." The last words were drowned in the general Homeric laughter. The laughter diffused the situation. From the crowd of compassionate women heard sympathetic exclamation, "We must help, or Katya will give her soul to God." I asked Petin if he had ever delivered a baby. The orderly grinned. "Hey, Comrade Lieutenant, the village feldsher is the one the women turn to for everything. How many children I gave a start in life, I can't count." "Then you've got the cards in your hand. Go with the citizen." I pointed to the distraught husband of the woman in labor, help his wife. Standing aside, we ask the partisan how we can stealthily get to Bald Mountain from the western side. "Do not worry, Comrade Commander," we assured the partisan. "We have well studied the defensive positions of the fascists on the mountain. We had to bypass it more than once during night raids. I will lead you there where their defenses are quite weak. Only 2 guns are standing." So, without further delay, we set off again. Soon Petin caught up with us. Wiping his wet forehead, he said with a smile, "A little boy has been born. He turned out to be so loud. Hardly hatched, he'll be howling. He'll live." Satisfied with the successful completion of the usual for him in peacetime business, Petin felt. After all, what a parsley it turns out to be. There is blood and death all around, and in the midst of all this horror, a sprout of new life breaks through and declares itself in full voice. You, Comrade Petin, are a philosopher, smiled Mitrofan Vasilievich, who was walking beside me. I am not a philosopher, Comrade Politruk. I am a humanist, Petin objected with a serious look. Philosophers are different. Some of them can justify any mischief with their vagrant language. But humanists have one thing in common, love for man. For man, as wise people say, is the final link of all evolution in living nature. Only the existence of man justifies the meaning of the origin of all life on our planet. The fascist also belongs to the human race, Mitrofan Vasilievich remarked. Therefore, you, as a humanist, should love the fascist. If a fascist is wounded and needs my help, I, as a medic, will give it. But if he has a gun in his hands, I will not hesitate to kill him. Silently taking a few steps, Petin continued. Humanity, to its shame, is forced to recognize that the fascist is also Homo sapiens, but it is a raving part of humanity. Therefore, those who are treatable must be treated, and the raving and incurable must be destroyed like rabid dogs. I vote for such humanism with both hands, laughed Mitrofan Vasilievich. I listened to Petin's words with interest and thought. The Soviet man goes to war not as a blind executor of someone else's will, but with a deep understanding of the humanity of his mission. This is one of the sources of the invincibility of the Red Army. I heard from someone that some people are like sausage. What they stuff them with, they carry in themselves, said Petin, wrinkling his red-blue nose with a simple-minded smile. The fascist bosses managed to stuff a significant part of their compatriots with National Calvinist stuffing. One consolation, not all Germans accept such stuffing. When I bandaged wounded prisoners, I saw perfectly normal people. Our guide confidently loops through the ravines, takes the company farther and farther away from the factory, and we do not know that the enemy, seeking at any cost to repel the brickyard, a significant force attacked the forward 2nd Battalion of Captain Martinov and surrounded the 5th Rifle Company. Regimental Commander Major Andreev, Captain Mansyrev and Regimental Commissar Komissarov at the most critical moment broke through with a group of soldiers of the commandant platoon to the surrounded, raised them in the attack, and forced the Nazis to retreat. And at this time our 8th Company continued to deeply encircle Bald Mountain from the west. Stealth maneuver was facilitated by a rare for the Crimea snowfall, which every hour intensified. It seems that from above, from behind the grey canopy, someone, as if from a bag, throws handfuls of the whitest salt, and the wind picks it up and throws it in our faces. From the constant expectation of collision with the enemy, from frequent ascents and descents, it became so hot that I stopped feeling the chilling gusts of the northeast wind. Our experienced guide confidently delved deeper into the enemy's position. Indeed, his defences here are quite thin. The scouts timely detect the guard trenches, and we bypass them unnoticed. It's getting dark. The precipitous slope of the ravine has turned into an icy hill. The children in Siberia like to go ice skating on such slides. We are climbing up the steep, icy slope. We would need an ice axe and boots with spikes. Naturally, we have neither. The soldiers climb up, digging into the ice with sapper spades. Then one or another of them falls off and slips until they catch on some ledge or bush. Almost at the very top of the mountain, we came upon a Nazi guard. There was indiscriminate firing. Now, in my opinion, it's time to shout hurrah. Mitrofan Vasilievich threw. It's time. I agree. Almost simultaneously, we jump up and shout hurrah. We are supported by the fighters. Their grey shadows flicker on the fresh snow. The fascist guards are instantly crushed. The soldiers spread out along the summit, and on the opposite slope of Bald Mountain, a fierce firefight is heard. Having turned in a chain, the company moves to the noise of the battle. It's the appearance of the Soviet soldiers from the rear, and shouts of hurrah finally undermined the steadfastness of the Hitlerites and caused a commotion. Crammed from all sides, they are rushing around the flat top of the mountain in search of salvation. As if in such a turmoil their own not to shoot. We stop the company and prepare to meet the retreating fascists with fire, but the shooting gradually subsides. From the eastern and southern slopes comes the muffled rumble of voices. Those Germans, heard anxious exclamations. I'm transmitting along the chain. Shoot only on my command. The voices are getting closer. Because of the gusts of wind, it is difficult to hear what language the people are speaking. I thought they shouted vorwärts. I wanted to command fire, and suddenly I clearly heard someone in the darkness, probably having stumbled, swearing loudly out of surprise, as only native Russaks can swear. My heart went coax. They almost hit their own. Who's coming? I shouted at the top of my voice. Nobody answers. Then the familiar voice of the commander of the 9th Company asks, "Who are you?" When I'm sure that they're coming, I shout with all my lungs, Our own! Our own! All tune in! You striped devils! We almost alive, my friend. The commander of the 9th Company is squeezing me in his arms, saying, Alive! Alive! And the commander was about to write a funeral for you. I briefly told how we climbed the icy slopes. Yes, a difficult task fell to you, said the lieutenant, shaking his head sympathetically. But we, brother, got it too. After the brick factory, the fascists became furious. They counterattacked Martinov's battalion with such fury that we had to rush to his aid. We threw them back to Lycia, and then it began. The fascists were hiding in holes from the very foot of the mountain to the top, and were shooting, sparing no bullets. And the slopes you saw for yourself. What a slope! That's how, step by step, we smoked the fascists out of their holes. Only in the evening the work went faster. Darkness hid us from the enemy observers. And then our neighbours on the right, 2 battalions of the 716th Regiment, broke into the heights from the northeast and diverted considerable enemy forces. And the Krauts were quite alarmed when suddenly there was shooting in their rear on the northwestern slopes. We could not understand with whom there was a firefight, but Captain Nikolayenko suggested that it was probably you and your company. And so, it turns out it is. A quarter of an hour later, I reported to the battalion commander how the company had carried out the order and with what losses. After listening, Captain Nikolayenko smiled slightly. And you, Lieutenant, by any chance, did not get lost. Maybe that's why you ended up behind enemy lines. Knowing the disposition of the commander, I answered in his tongue. If I got lost, comrade combat, then only according to your order. Ha ha ha. Nikolayenko couldn't stand it. Well done, so announced to your company, Molod C. I looked at the clocks about midnight. Not a single shot could be heard on Bold Mountain. The silence of the night is broken only by the calls of, and on Mount Mithridates and on other heights adjacent to Bold Mountain from the southwest. The shooting has stopped. The defeated fascist units retreated to Koktebel. Captain Nikolayenko announced that the enemy might try to recapture the mountain at night, so the battalions took the defense, deployed along the eastern, northern and western slopes. Since the trenches were dug by the Nazis only on the slopes facing Fedosia, each soldier had to hollow out in the frozen ground at least a cell for shooting standing. Having got 1 sapper shovel for 2 men, we take turns with the political officer to chisel the ground diligently. We understand that in this way the command of the regiment hopes to warm the soldiers to protect them from frostbite. The frost, by our Siberian standards, is trifling. About 12 degrees, only in the morning the mercury column dropped to -19. However, to me, a native Siberian, it seemed more terrible than 40 degrees. It is true what they say that in the south the cold is more difficult to bear than in the north. Petty Officer Sankin came up, taking a huge thermos off his shoulders. He comrade comrade, permission to feed the soldiers a hot lunch. Here their wives. He pointed at the men crowded behind his single, cooked the soup, and comrades helped to bring it, and also took ammunition. Distributed quickly. At the thought of hot soup painfully sucked under the spine, and the news of the delivered ammunition, as if a stone was lifted from his soul. The company is ready to fight again. I warmly thank the locals for their help. They respond with embarrassment. What is it? We are always ready. Thank you for the liberation. For the sake of victory over the monsters, we, Commander, are ready for anything, said an elderly man with a cold. Spitting and wiping his whiskers, he concluded, Give us weapons and lead us into battle. I'm not authorized to lead you into battle, Father, I objected. But if you help me to bring the wounded to the city, I will thank you again. We'll do everything. Don't hesitate. Having heard about the hot soup, the soldiers threw down their spatulas and surrounded the petty officer. Having received their portion, they clutched the hot pot in their palms and, closing their eyes, blissfully inhaled the fragrant steam. I had never eaten simple homemade potato soup with such pleasure. Having dined, the soldiers became cheerful and willingly returned to work. Teretian found crowbars and big sharp shovels among the property, delivered from the fascists. The work went faster. Long before dawn, the shooting cells were ready. the soldiers, having taken shelter in them from the wind, began to fall asleep. The commanders took turns going around the trenches, waking the soldiers, forcing them to run. I experienced how easy it was to fall into eternal sleep. By 4 o'clock in the morning, thoroughly exhausted, I sat down to rest in a trench. Soon I felt that I could no longer feel the frost. It was as if I was getting warmer, and then a treacherous sleep seized me. I woke up from a strong push on my shoulder. "Get up, Alexander Terentievich," I heard the voice of the political officer. "Get up, don't sleep." "And I'm not sleeping," I muttered in reply, but I couldn't move a leg or an arm. With great difficulty I get up and intensively knead my joints, and then run to warm up. "Come, Alexander Terentievich, to the dugout. Warm yourself," says Abramenko, shaking off a thick layer of fluffy snow from me. "Or the balls will freeze. How will you command?" He's still trying to make jokes. That's what, Mitrofan Vasilievich. I decided to cheat too. During the day we didn't have a minute to talk to the soldiers about the events at the front, about our victory today, and finally about our company heroes. You please take advantage of the respite and talk to each regular shift. The soldiers in the warm dugout will listen to you willingly. So they fall asleep the first second they get into the warmth, Abramenko objects. It's all right, if the message is interesting, they won't fall asleep. Try, says Mitrofan Vasilievich hesitantly, heading for the dugout. And I jump out of the hole cleared of snow and once again make a jog, jumping high and trying harder to hit the icy ground with my soles. And again my thoughts take me back to the school. How good that we, with all the Suvorov severity hardened commanders, from the first days in the school, we learned to walk in step. At the firing range, to which is almost 8 kilometers, running back to and moreover in full combat gear, and often in gas masks. In winter at 40-degree frost, we regularly made forced marches on skis. In the winter camp from morning till evening in the field. Even slept in snow trenches or in huts made of spruce branches. Judging by the sufferings of my subordinates, it was not so hard for me on that December night on Bald Mountain. I could afford to give up the pleasure of warming myself in the dugout. At dawn, Sankin sought me out. Comrade, for breakfast, millet porridge with meat. When will you allow me to distribute it? Immediately, I ordered ye and feed them to the full. It's going to be a hard day. I got 2 portions for each man. The foreman reassured me, for dinner and breakfast, and also the commissars for each soul, drinking and non-drinking. From all sides, people poured to the thermoses. Having received their portion of porridge and vodka, everyone hurries to swallow them as soon as possible in the hope of warming up at least a little. You, Botchkov, should split your portion in 2, or you'll get tipsy, says Malishko with a serious look to his friend, who, having crossed himself, was about to splash vodka into his wide-open mouth. Such a wish to Botchkov causes laughter. Why are you laughing, devils? Bogutkov is indignant. You can't figure out how to moisten your tongue with this drop of vodka. And he carefully licks the vodka from the lid of the kettle, which causes a new explosion of laughter. My heart rejoices to see how the fighters have revived, and it was hard to believe that they had not slept for 2 nights. Soaked through, ran around, frozen to the bone. The hour of battle was approaching, and they found the strength to jolt. The frost and wind increased by morning. The snowfall covered all the roads and paths, a rare phenomenon for the Crimea. In the dugout of Captain Nikolaenko was packed with so many people that I miraculously managed to squeeze in. Combat announced that at dawn the offensive will resume. The commander of the detachment, Major Andriy Priashal, ordered the 716th Infantry Regiment of Major Kalinin to advance north of the Simferopol Highway, our 633rd. Along the road to the old Crimea, 251st Mountain Rifle Regiment was to expand the captured bridgehead in a southwestern direction to Koktebel. Nikolaenko emphasized that the further success of the operation depended on how quickly the forward units would advance, and in conclusion, reported that the battalions of Captains Bazinski and Martinov will interact with the 716th Rifle Regiment in the capture of settlements lying along the Simferopol Highway and north of it, and our battalion, advancing on the old Crimea south of the highway, should see to it that the Nazis did not break through to the rear at the junction between our and 251st Mountain Rifle Regiment. The offensive resumed at dawn. Barely the soldiers tried to start their descent, as they were picked up and carried down with increasing speed. Only by a miracle they were able to grab onto something and stop the fall. Going down the precipitous slopes of the icy mountain was more difficult than going up. Platoon commanders ordered to use sapper shovels to cut out some sort of ladders. However, this could delay the descent for a long time. Tereshin was the first to find a way out. He grabbed a large sapper shovel, sat on it on horseback, and, braking with his feet, was soon downstairs. The soldiers followed his example, and those who did not have a big shovel or a crowbar used a small sapper shovel, the tip of which served as a good brake. However, we did not do without bruises and bumps. Finally, we are at the foot of the cursed mountain. Visibility is poor. Snowfall does not subside. There are no landmarks. I point out to the platoon commanders the azimuths of movement. I am sure that up to a large settlement, which stretched along the road to Coq de Belle, we will not meet a single fascist. At the thought that they, barricaded in their holes, sit in the warmth and bliss, there was such an unbearable desire to smoke them out into the cold, that my legs besides will carried me forward, following the sentries. Mitrofan Vasilievich, blue from the cold, hastened after me, wheezing with a cold. Commander, where are you being carried by the evil power? Don't dig in. Remember what Chapayev said? Where should the commander be when the situation is unclear? I silently quicken my step, and when the political officer's cheeks turned pink, I stop and, unable to refrain from laughing, Vasily Ivanovich was right. You are our dear political leader. The commander should never go before the fatherland. And since you, I see, have already thawed out, now we can lag behind a little. Puffing and wiping his forehead with his hat, Abramenko laughed. You're a cunning fellow, Alexander Terentievich. You've got me all steamed up, even throw off my overcoat. And on the right side of the highway, where the village of nearby Buga should be, there was fierce firing. They've run into the fascist defences, I thought. Now they will not be smoked out of the warmth into the cold. They will fight to the last. Suddenly the chain rang. Tanks from the rear. To the battle. One by one, the companies turned front to Feodosia. They lay down. Looking carefully at the horizon, I find tanks. They're moving out of the city. Whose? It's hard to tell through the snow veil. Ours by all accounts. But what if they are fascist? We're looking at the fighters. I know from experience. It is not easy to defeat tank fear. But my anxiety is in vain. Not a single soldier did not tremble. When the tanks came closer and we could clearly see their silhouettes, I breathed a sigh of relief. Soviet T-34s. Here and the tankers found us. The front tank stopped. The cars that were walking a little behind equaled it and also stood up, threateningly waving their guns. But the infantrymen saw the red stars on the turrets and with joyful cries jumped up, rushed to the tanks. The tankers opened hatches, jumped out of the vehicles. The infantrymen surrounded them, picked them up and began to throw them up. Having escaped from the embrace, one tanker shouted, "Who's in charge here?" "E.I.E." Nikolayenko responded and, stepping towards the tanker, loudly called himself. The commander of the 3rd Battalion of the 633rd Rifle Regiment of the 157th Rifle Division, Captain Nikolayenko. The commander of the Tank Battalion of the 236th Rifle Division, Captain Kostenko, introduced himself and clenched the commander's outstretched hand with such force that he involuntarily wrinkled from pain. "That's XTP on my palm, you bear." Nikolayenko tried to smile, pulling out his hand. "What am I going to use to hold my weapon, or what, my teeth?" Kostenko explained that his battalion would join us on the offensive to the old Crimea. Captain Nikolayenko acquainted him with the situation. The news of the arrival of tankers pleased the tired fighters. They moved more confidently to the west. However, soon the tanks turned to the east and disappeared behind a white veil of snowfall. From Nikolayenko, we learned that the commander of the tankers received a radio order to hurry to the aid of Major Kalinin's 716th Rifle Regiment. The tanks did not return to us. It's rightly said that rumors spread faster than telegraphic messages. Did you hear that? They say the fascists have come to our rear. 716th Regiment is already surrounded, said the big man Budkin Slim, stumbling from fatigue Megula. Sergeant Malishko silently tore off Budkin's hat, grabbed him by the ear with his pliers fingers, and, having bent his head to the ground 3 times, angrily "Didn't your father teach you not to bullshit? So I'll teach you, you stoic fool." Oh, the soldier begged. Let me go, Comrade Sergeant. By God, I won't say another word. Look, Budkin. Malishko wagged his finger. If I hear any more bullshit, I'll tear off both ears. The big man Budkin looked so ashamed and childishly offended that Migulia and the rest of the men laughed merrily. I told you, said the quiet, judicious Lotkov, instructing the injured man, don't talk so much. You've got yourself a fine for spreading panic rumours. Shut up, you googhead, Budkin swung angrily at him, or you'll get it. But, Budkin, don't be so glib, calmly put down his comrade Lotkov. Be glad you got off easy, or you might even be court-martialed for such things. In war, brother, to spread rumours is to help the enemy, and you might become a gouge-eater sooner than my fellow countrymen if I don't feed you for 10 days. Lotkov was nicknamed a gouge-eater after one day. In a moment of revelation, he told me that in their village in a hungry year one peasant had gone so far as to steal leather gouges from a rich neighbour, cut them into small pieces and boiled them. Hush, interrupted Bochkov. Do you hear? Everyone stopped and listened, somewhere behind the village of near Baibuga, in which, as the commander reported, there were already battalions of Major Kalinin's rifle regiment. The noise of the battle was growing. There were muffled bursts of mines, sharp shots of regimental cannons, machine gun and rifle fire. Suddenly a horse came out of the snow veil at full gallop, behind which, by some miracle, the camp kitchen was bouncing high, leaving behind it a thick plume of smoke. The cook sitting next to the rider had his left hand on the seat rail, and in his right hand he was holding in front of him, like a Cossack with a spade, a large ladle on a long handle. Komsor Grisha Avdiev, noticing the rapidly approaching kitchen, mockingly shouted, Well lost the Krauts, if even the most harmless and quiet our cook personally went to attack. Stop, where are you going, you fool? Stop. Mistrofan Vasilievich, spreading his arms wide, blocked the way of the galloping horse. But it was apparently unstoppable. It flew at the political officer, and it seemed that the misfortune could not be prevented. Suddenly the political officer was overshadowed by the powerful figure of Malishko. He jumped up, caught hold of the collar, and with all his body weight hung on the reeling horse. It collapsed to its knees, tumbled on its right side, toppling the kitchen. The rider and the cook flew over the horse by inertia and buried their faces in the fluffy snow. The cook lay still, not letting go of the ladle. Soldiers from Ukraintsev's platoon came running from. They turned the sledder and the cook on their backs, put the kitchen on wheels, lifted up the animal trembling with every vein. All were animatedly discussing the unexpected incident and rejoiced at the political officer's deliverance from imminent death. Meanwhile, the perpetrators of the incident, stunned by the unexpected somersault mortale, came to their senses. Fortunately, they got off with bruises. Thier didn't lose any organs on the way. Woe riders, Grisha Avdiev sneered, almost took the porridge to the Krauts. For such a case they could have been court-martialed. As for an attempt to undermine the combat effectiveness of our waterproof battalion, after waiting for the laughter to subside, the commissar added, I feel, brothers, there will be trouble. They will take our dinner to the Krauts some day. Where the hell were you going? Mitrofan Vasilievich asked the sledder. It was she, Zorka, said the sledder at last. She is so frightened, thunderstruck, that she is not happy. She has bitten her teeth and is going wherever she pleases. Have you ever ridden a horse? Interrupted the political officer. No, we lived in the city. We were shoemakers. That's just it. That shoemakers. Mr. Politruk waved his hand. And who appointed you as a rider? Turning to me, he added, Today I'll report to the commissar to restore order. Well, is the cook also a cobbler? Not at all, comrade political officer. The young cheek-boned cook answered clearly in a military manner. I took a cook's course and worked in the regimental canteen for a year. Will dinner be ready soon? Mitrofan Vasilievich got better. Yes, comrade Politruk, we'll prepare it in time. As soon as we clear the village of Nasipnaya, so that you will be there immediately. Abramenko added with a grin, just don't come before us. The incident lightened the anxious mood. The soldiers walked faster. About what so disturbed our rear units, we called in the evening. What happened was this. The commander of the 716th Rifle Regiment, Major Ivan Antonovich Kalinin, with 2 battalions broke into the near Baibuga. Hitlerites, using thick snowfall, put forward reserves, which bypassed the village from the east and broke through to the rear of the advancing battalions. Major Kalinin, characterized by extraordinary bravery, left one battalion to repel the counterattack from the front and threw the other against the enemy in the rear. At the same time, the commissar of the regiment, Yulian Yakovlevich Anikeyev, led the 3rd Battalion, which had just arrived from Feodosia, into the attack. The fascists, despite the desperate resistance, were completely destroyed. Major Andreev persistently advanced the battalions of the 633rd Regiment along the highway to Old Crimea. Every 10 minutes, Captain Nikolenko sent liaisons to the companies with one hour. Accelerate the advance. It's easy to say, speed up. The soldiers were walking with difficulty on the snow-covered field. Suddenly bullets whistled. We saw how the sent-forward patrol, shooting back, hastily retreating. The Red Army soldiers turned in a chain and fell into the snow, ready to meet the counter-attackers with fire. Sergeant Dushkin, who led the patrol, ran up to the platoon commander Tereshin, reported something. Having listened to the sergeant, Tereshin showed his hand to me and the political officer. Dushkin rushed to us and on the way, panting, shouting, "Nurses Krauts, they're coming straight at us." "To which is of any of this?" "A lot, the sergeant answers without thinking. "I can't say exactly. I can't see well." Dense chains of enemy infantry emerged from the white veil. Because of the thick snowfall, the collision was unexpected. We were separated by 100 meters. Such suddenness caused obvious nervousness on both sides, as evidenced by indiscriminate fire. The Nazis, encouraging themselves with loud yells, were advancing on our lying-in-place chains. From a machine gun would cut, so I thought, but the machine gunners, bogged down in the snow, as luck would have it, fell behind. The enemy chains were inexorably approaching. I remembered one of the teachings of Lieutenant Efemenko, my platoon from Novosibirsk school. Never wait for the enemy to pile up on you, attack, counterattack, but do not behave passively. Passive people are beaten. I was about 70 meters behind the platoons. Having decided to raise them in a counterattack, I rushed by short runs to the chain of the 1st platoon fighters. But before I could run to Ukraintsev, he, followed by Malishko, jumped up and with a shout of hurrah rushed at the enemy. In behind the commanders, the whole 1st platoon rose up in friendship. The attack resumed along the entire front. The nerve of the fascists could not withstand. Shooting back, they began to retreat. The snow, recently so white and fluffy, was stained with blood and turned into a grey-brown mess by hundreds of soldiers' boots. Movement across the snow-covered field exhausts both sides. The Germans retreat, barely moving their legs, often falling into the snow and trying to delay us with indiscriminate firing. As soon as bullets begin to whistle through the air, the Red Army soldiers amicably lie down in the snow to rest. However, seeing that the commanders continue to walk, reluctantly rise. Our main task is to break into Nasipnaya on the shoulders of the fascists, not to let them gain a foothold in the stone buildings. However, the Germans managed to slip into the village earlier. They settled in several houses and a warehouse. Now we have to eliminate the pockets of resistance. Having found out from Sergeant Gariv that Lieutenant Stupitsin is alive, but lagged behind, I stay in the 3rd platoon. When I ask him what he thinks to do, Gariv decisively answers, "We'll attack." "Have you thought out a plan of attack?" "We'll hit the fascists piece by piece. First, we'll pounce on the leftmost one." He pointed to a brick 5-window house on a high foundation. "The rest of the buildings will be held at gunpoint by Gretchen's department. As soon as we finish with the Krauts in this house, we'll deal with the next one, then the salary." After thinking, Gariv concluded, "So we can beat the Nazis with the fewest losses." "Reasonably." I agreed. "Seth, this sequence will provide the platoon superiority in strength." 18 soldiers prepared to storm the first house, and Sergeant Kirov is trying to get to him unnoticed from the side of the stone annex. Suddenly appears Grisha Avdiyev. He sneaks up to the attic window, from which, without a murmur, machine guns. Clinging to the wall of the house, Grisha gets close to the window and, after waiting for a pause in the firing, forcefully throws a grenade. Kaimarov, who followed the commissar, dismissed him, kicked the frame and disappeared in the resulting gash of DV, and the fighters jump after him. Geriev, waving his hand, rushes to the front door, but immediately falls under a hail of bullets and freezes. Killed, burying myself in the snow, I crawl to the sergeant. And in the house there are muffled explosions of grenades. Machine guns are silent. Geriev suddenly jumped up easily, ran to the door, which opened wide open from the grenade explosion. Several languid minutes passed, and now Gariv and Kirov appear at the door of the house unharmed, dragging heavy German machine guns with metal ribbons full of shiny cartridges. Having stacked them at the threshold, Gariv reports. "See, we'll use them when storming the next stronghold." It was impossible to get to the second house from the outbuildings. All the approaches were shot from the stone warehouse, and the dense fire from the house prevented us from approaching the warehouse. To break into the house from the front entrance. And here Pekin, Stepanko and Menikov crawl to it cautiously, under cover of all fire means of the assault group. The fascists do not notice them. Having blown up the door, all three rush inside, clearing the way with grenades. The commotion caused by the explosions distracts the attention of the fascists. The assault group takes advantage of this and rushes towards the house. The stone warehouse is next in line, which is easier to take. Confident in its successful assault, I hurry to the platoon of Lieutenant Ukraintsev. I find the platoon commander in the attic of one of the occupied houses. He is looking through binoculars at the adjacent buildings. Seeing me, Ukraintsev rises tiredly and reports, "No finish, Comrade Komratai. Now Malishko is knocking the krauts out of that building." Looking in the direction where the lieutenant was pointing, I saw a squat stone building surrounded by a fence. We came down from the attic and went to the place of battle. The shooting had subsided. Machine gunner Grishchenko brought out 5 disarmed fascists towards us. When Grishchenko equaled us, Ukraintsev asked, "Where are you going?" Nobryadz's agent ordered to hand them over to the battalion. Having seen off the prisoners, we entered the courtyard. A group of Red Army soldiers surrounded their comrades lying in the snow. Having noticed us, the soldiers parted. In one of the dead I recognized Lotkov. On a face as white as snow froze inherent in him an expression of calmness and businesslike behavior. The face of the other one was disfigured by bursting bullets. I look questioningly at Ukraintsev. "Migilia? No. How could he be like this?" A pale Malishko comes out of the building. "Chatting to Met Comrade, 12 dead and 5 prisoners," he reports tiredly. Throwing a quick glance at the dead, he adds, "We lost Migulier and Loktov." While I reached Tereshin's platoon, the village became quiet. At Tereshin I met Mitrofan Vasilevich alive and unharmed. Deadly tired but satisfied with the outcome of the battle, he reported that in the second platoon 3 lightly wounded and 1 killed. Wounded Petin bandaged. They asked permission to stay in the company until the liberation of the old Crimea. Permission, asks the political officer. Let the guys go to the medical center liberators of old Crimea. We'll allow it. Let's go to the commander. Impatiently listening to my report, Nikolayenko said, "Comrade Altunin, do not waste time. Immediately go to Akhmelez. Go around it from the south and intercept the escape routes to the west." "And what about lunch?" Mitrofan Vasilevich suddenly intervenes. "People haven't eaten since 6 in the morning. The fight in Nesotnoye has worn them out. At least we should give them a short respite." "We can't." There's deep regret in the commander's voice. "Every minute is precious. If we allow the enemy to create an organized defense, we will pay with the lives of soldiers." And again, stumbling from fatigue, we, hungry, needing snow, keeping the direction to the southern outskirts of the ancient Tatar village. The wind gradually subsides. In the pre-dawn twilight, we easily overcome a deep snow-covered gully and come to the village, from which fierce shooting is heard. Judging by the fact that we do not hear the whistle of bullets, they are shooting in the opposite direction. We move in a wide chain to the village from the west and unexpectedly for the enemy appear on its outskirts. The surviving fascists break through on the road leading to the highway. Shining darkness envelops the village. The Red Army soldiers are completely exhausted. Going into the warm rooms, they sink to the floor and instantly fall asleep. We go through the village in search of the commander. We find him in a spacious house on the northern outskirts. All, comrades, The commander waves his hand. "That's enough for today. Organize the defense, settle down for the night, and quickly feed the people. Kitchens have already arrived." Calling me to the map, Nikolayenko specified. "Your company will occupy the houses on the southern outskirts. Put out a circular guard. Who knows, maybe the unkilled Krauts and from the side of Feodosia will appear. Keep machine guns at full readiness. Machine gunners rest alternately. At dawn we'll continue the attack on Old Crimea. The main forces of the battalion will move along the highway, and you and your company will go on the virgin land to the southwest. Stealthily come to the Old Crimea from the south and saddle the highway. By all means cut off the enemy's escape routes while we are pressing him along the highway. Any questions?" The task is clear, but the only question, as always, is grenades and ammunition. We're all used up. Don't count on much, warns the captain. Ammunition hasn't arrived yet. By 5 o'clock send men for ammunition. While we were discussing the plan of action for December 31, the Chief of Staff distributed the houses between the companies and indicated the boundaries on which should be put up a combat guard. Sailor Vev looked extremely usually cheerful, grey eyes, faded dark circles under his eyes. He was no longer teasing the infantryman, and when I met him, I did not hear his favourite saying, "Well, Piakota, lazy to work but hungry." Seeing me, Veniamin only smiled tiredly and said briefly, "Hello." And when I, leaving, told him goodbye, bye, he shouted, "And my birthday we will still celebrate in the old Crimea." When we returned to the company, the soldiers had already settled in the houses. Near one of them there was a camp kitchen, around which it was as lively as in an oriental bazaar. The rooms with low ceilings are stuffy. The soldiers are sitting along the walls, lying on the floor. People are so exhausted by sleepless nights, frost, malnutrition, and incessant fighting that they fell asleep without touching their food. At midnight, Sergeant Senkin suddenly appeared. His overcoat, face and hands were stained with machine oil. "The comrade Comrote," he reports in a chilly voice. "The wounded have been brought to the regimental infirmary. I brought trophy grenades, rifles and cartridges." "Brought? With what?" "A German truck. We spotted it in Nasip Noyi, but the engine wouldn't start. Together with Red Army man Panov, we repaired it. I know a little about engines, and he worked on a tractor before the war." "Have you seen Lieutenant Stupitsin?" I asked. "The lieutenant was killed. He jumped on the fascists who broke through behind the nearby butte, and in the melee he was pierced through with a bayonet in the chest." Having stopped talking, Sankin added, "I learned about it in the medical station, where the mortally wounded lieutenant was taken." "And how did he end up behind Blishnaya by Buga?" "They say that he was travelling together with lightly wounded men." "Why?" "I don't know," shrugged Sankin. Calling Petin. A sleepy orderly squeezes through the door. His whole appearance expresses displeasure at being woken up. "Did you know that Lieutenant Stupitsin was wounded?" I ask him. "I knew," mutters Petin. "Why didn't you report it?" "Why report?" He is surprised by the orderly. "The wound is trifling. The bullet scratched the forearm, the bone is intact. We have half a company with such wounds." Stupitsin's caution has failed him badly, I thought. I ordered Sankin to give platoon commanders a third of the grenades, rifles, ammunition, the rest to take to the disposal of the battalion commander. Returning, Sankin reported, "The battalion commander ordered to give you thanks for the ammunition, and he promised to present me for an award." Stomping on the spot, the petty officer added, "And the captain took the car. He said that the supply platoon needed it more." "The two with it." I calmed the distressed petty officer. "It can't go off-road and over the beams." Mitrofan Vasilevich, quietly entering the room, tiredly sank down on the carpet, and with a sense of satisfaction said, "Well, the mountain off my shoulders. All those who before the landing submitted an application with a request to be accepted into the party, approved by the political department candidates now we will announce it. It's a pity that Bondarev, Lebev and Miguli are no longer among us. In letters to their relatives we will definitely inform that they fell in battle, as befits communists." Having heard the message about Stupitsin's death, the political officer grinned bitterly. How careful the lieutenant took care of himself, how cautious he was, but he died before us, and even in the rear. He hesitated and concluded, "No, our lieutenant was far from being a hero. I can't raise my hand to tell my relatives. He died a brave death." "We are not heroes either. Nobody wants to die," I objected, upset by thoughts of the grief of the mother of the deceased. "No," exclaimed Mitrofan Vasilevich. "The soldiers who have been walking through the fire for the third day without hiding behind the backs of their comrades are true heroes. Have you heard a word of complaint or discontent from them?" "No, I haven't, but I saw with what passion they sought the right to go into battle, and maybe to die as communists. Courage, steadfastness, readiness for self-sacrifice. Are these not the traits of a true hero? Did we see in Quiet My Gal something special, heroic? And he died saving Lotkov. And in battle, I tell you, fighters show truly massive heroism. That's why it's a shame when you see the absence of such traits in a commander." Our conversation was interrupted by Party Commander Vekov. We agreed to gather the communists at 5 o'clock. Ukraintsev came, reported that the location of the company is calm, duty handed over to Tereshin, and go. After Tereshin, it was the turn of Mitrofan Vasilievich. I was to replace him. Having thrown off my overcoat, I stretched out with pleasure and instantly fell asleep. I was awakened by an alarming cry. Nurse, comrade Komratai. I opened my eyes. Sankin is kneeling beside me. I had never seen him in such despair. Having taken off his hat, he, for some reason changing to a whisper, repeats. Meditrain Comrade Politruk was killed. They killed Comrade Abramenko. They killed Mitrofan Vasilievich, the bastards. Who killed him? I shout, stunned by the terrible news. The Krauts, the damned Krauts, Sankin moaned. Where? In the 3rd platoon. I jump out into the street and run to the combat guard, believing that Mitrofan Vasilievich died there. Not there. Sankin points to a squat building where Sergeant Gary's platoon was camped for the night. The terrible news has brought the whole company to its feet. Armed Red Army soldiers are running from all sides. In the courtyard, I encounter a group of furious soldiers of the 3rd platoon, surrounded by some men in Oriental dress. Who are they? I ask loudly, but get no answer. The Red Army soldiers, trying to reach the detainees with their fists, are pushing the soldiers who are guarding them. Mati your pension. Stop this outrage. This time I was heard. The soldiers recoiled from the detainees and turned unhappily towards me. Red Army man Shayan is twitching with indignation. Who was detained, Shayan? Lurking vipers, damned Krauts, Comrade Komratai. He threatens the detainees with his fist. They wanted to slaughter Comrade political officer. Where's Mitrofan Vasilievich? Over there. Shayan points to the door leading to the living quarters. But we guard the detainees until we find out. Yes, I ordered. In the room, by the light of an oil lamp, Pitin nimbly bandages the political officer's shoulder. Droplets of sweat appeared on Mitrofan Vasilievich's forehead. What happened? Is the wound grey? I asked, lowering myself down beside him. No, Mitrofan Vasilievich waved away carelessly. It was Narth. The blade of a dagger cut through his overcoat and slid down his shoulder. During my rounds, I saw 3 figures, wrapped in women's clothes, sneaking towards the outbuildings. They seemed suspicious to them. They were too tall for women, and their gait was not feminine. I shouted stop, but they ran away. I took out my revolver, rushed after them, and someone struck a blow at me near the barn. Falling down, I pulled the trigger. Sergeant Gretchen and his men came running at the shot. They surrounded the yard and detained 4 men who did not look like locals. When I reported the emergency, Captain Nikolaenko ordered a thorough search of all the buildings, look in all the nooks and crannies. There were 17 hours left till New Year's Eve. We left at dawn before the main forces because we had to make a deep bypass maneuver. I approached Abramenko, whom I had persuaded to stay in the village together with the petty officer, and extended my hand. Goodbye, Mitrofan Vasilievich. See you in the old Crimea, he answered quietly. Goodbye, Mitrofan Vasilievich. See you soon. I did not suppose that this meeting would never take place. It was still dark when the platoon columns descended from the southwestern outskirts of Akmeles into a deep lowland and marched along it, drowning in snow. The weather had changed dramatically. The cold northeastern wind had subsided, the temperature had jumped sharply upward, and the air smelled damp. The sun that broke through the clouds melted the snow. We walk ankle-deep in water that seeps into our boots. More and more often fascist bombers are flying over us, but their deadly cargo they drop mainly on the highway, where the main forces of the regiment are advancing. From behind the ridge of heights on the side of the old Crimea appeared skittish messers. They fly low over the ground, almost over our heads, and, having already passed, suddenly turn around. Spread out. The fighters scattered across the field. The fighters are circling the company like hawks. Finally, having shot the last cartridges, they fly away. I command, assemble in platoon columns and continue on the way. Having carefully examined the field, I sighed with relief. The fascists had wasted their ammunition. As I approached the first platoon, I noticed that a trickle of blood was running down the neck of the tall Bochkov. Bochkov, we shout. Are you wounded? So. He waved away. He burned a little. Pitin quickly puts a bandage on his shot ear. Slowly climbing the slopes of the fight, which rises above the old Crimea from the northeast. Calling platoon commanders, I move forward with them and go out on the ridge. An unexpected picture opens before our eyes. The rays of the sun illuminate the lowland, where the old Crimea is located, as in the palm of your hand you can see its houses. On the highway to the northeastern outskirts of the village flows a continuous stream of enemy vehicles with soldiers and cargo. The sight of retreating fascists deprived me of cold blood. I remember the order of the commander: ride the highway and close the road to the fascists. I deployed the company in a chain and accelerated step leading down. When the chain reaches the middle of the lowland and you can already clearly distinguish everything happening on the highway, some unstoppable force picks me up and throws me forward. I almost snatch the machine gun from Malishko's hands and fire a long line at the column of cars packed with fascists. They scatter. We rush forward. A little me outside, our attack would seem a daring venture. A little more than 100 fighters attack numerically superior enemy, though scattered along the highway. However, we were counting on surprise, on the fact that the battalion and then the regiment would come. I turn my head to the left to take a look at the chain of the attackers, and my right cheek and neck burn like molten lead. My mouth fills with blood. I stumble and fall, and the Nazi machine gun, mounted on the armoured personnel carrier, mows down everything around. Near me fall wounded and killed. I try to suppress the enemy machine gun, but from the strong recoil I lose consciousness. Waking up, I see that Malishko continues his duel with the machine gunner with short bursts. The laying fighters force the fascists to interrupt the movement on the highway. Suddenly I hear the calm voice of Ukrainci. Comrade Comrade. On our left, the Krauts are dismounting from their vehicles, crossing the stream and running to the crest of the height from which we descended. At least 2 companies. Detain them, you with difficulty, quietly I say. Give the command. All follow the company commander. Descending from the crest of the height, I notice that between the height and the highway runs a small rivulet, more like a stream with steep banks. With the help of the soldiers, I get up and, overpowering the pain, step towards the stream. I hear how clearly our machine guns work. They don't allow fascists to rush in pursuit. I think about Lieutenant Ukraintsev with special warmth. I am calm. If I die, the company will remain in safe hands. Before hiding under the precipitous bank of the stream, I look carefully at the battlefield, and a feeling of joy overwhelms. The company is withdrawing in an organized manner. The machine gunners are retreating one by one. There are no signs of confusion. We are wading through the icy water. We can't go ashore. They will mow us down. This way seemed endless and agonizing to me. My neck becomes sticky with blood. Gradually, the collar of my uniform is soaked with it. I feel how weakness increases with every step. My head is getting more and more dizzy. The last strength is leaving me. I lean against the shore and make it clear to call Pete in. Geriev reports that the instructor was killed and adds guiltily that all dressing materials are used up. Nobody had clean rags. I thought of taking off my clothes and tearing my woolen shirt, but I immediately abandoned this idea, for we were standing waist-deep in icy water, and bullets were whistling incessantly over our heads. We're not out of the firing bag yet. There is no time to lose. With an effort, I push myself off the shore and walk on. Geriev is walking next to me, ready to support me at any moment. Finally, not far from Iziumovka, we meet the battalion. With difficulty, I ask where the commander is, and face-to-face with the battalion commissar, Petty Officer Sinilnikov. "You'll bleed to death," he shouts, pulling out of his pocket individual bag. "Let me bandage it." Having unbuttoned his overcoat and overcoat, he tries for a long time how best to apply a bandage. It was not easy. The entrance hole was on the cheek, and the exit hole was on the neck. He decides to bandage the neck first. Then he does it unskillfully and causes me a lot of pain. But I am strong, I endure. Having finished bandaging, Sinelnikov silently gives me a note. To Lieutenant Altunin, "I'm seriously wounded. I entrust the command of the battalion to you. I reported to the regiment commander. I wish you success." Nikolai, not believing my eyes, I ran through the uneven lines again. Consciousness of increased responsibility causes an unexpected surge of strength, as if the pain subsided and my legs became stronger. Together with the Komsorg, I go to the battalion command post. Lieutenant Soloviev, seeing me, bandaged, inexperienced hands, sadly whistle. "That's what they've painted you, my friend. How will you lead the battalion into battle? I can't see you from under the bandages." It's all right, I'll lead if ordered. I wheezed. Report the situation. From the report I realized that the regiment managed to break into the old Crimea. In the city entered the fresh motorized units of the enemy and from the start of the battle. An hour later, Major Andreev gathered battalion commanders. Seeing me, he asked if I could command. I nodded affirmatively and sat down on a vacant seat. Many of the commanders, like me, have white bandages. I listened to the calm voice of Major Andreev and suddenly felt the bench crawl out from under me. The room spun, and I fell into some abyss. The loss of blood. I woke up in the back of a truck. It's bright. The back of the truck was bouncing on the potholes. A girl was leaning over me, carefully adjusting my bandage. How do you feel, Comrade Lieutenant? She asks me sympathetically. I raise my thumb. That's good. The girl smiles. Now we will come to Feodosia, put you in the hospital, and soon you will be able to fight again. We entered the city. The car stopped at some building. I was taken into a room where an infantry lieutenant and an elderly artilleryman with 4 sleepers in his buttonholes were already lying. A big commander, I thought. The orderly helped me to take off my overcoat and boots. I did not dare to take off the rest of my clothes. The room was not heated, and lay down on a dirty bunk, pulling a thin old blanket over me. How are things at the front line, Lieutenant? Asked the colonel. How far have ours advanced? Toward the old Crimea. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to talk. No, I'm not talking. The colonel raised his hand in sympathy. There was silence in the ward for a long time. I dozed off. Late in the evening came a nurse and 4 orderlies who could barely move their legs to take me to the operating room. A skinny old man from the local doctors carefully examined and treated my wounds. When the stitches were out, the doctor, smiling encouragingly, said, Well, my dove, from the looks of it, you have a huge loss of blood. We'll treat it. Excruciating days and nights dragged on. I suffered from cold and malnutrition. Then my young organism, a deck. In a week I could walk and talk a little. The lieutenant, wounded in the shoulder, also recovered quickly. The colonel's legs were amputated. He suffered a lot. During the day he tried to hide his worries, and at night, when he forgot himself in a short and heavy sigh, he raved, moaned loudly, or gave commands. As soon as we woke up, we pulled blankets from our bunks and covered the colonel with them. Under a pile of blankets he became warmer. He seemed to revive, began to ask us questions, or told us how he had commanded a battery in the Civil War. My lieutenant and I collected information about the situation of our troops in the Crimea and reported them to the colonel. One day he regretfully exclaimed, Hey, it's a pity we don't have a map of the Crimean Peninsula. The next day the lieutenant got somewhere a large school map of Ukraine with the Crimean Peninsula. The colonel demanded red and blue pencils. On the neatly folded map he dotted the map and asked me to connect them with a bold red line that stretched from the Sivash coast east of Old Crimea and broke off on the Black Sea coast near Koktebel. With a blue pencil he drew the scanty information we had about the enemy. Every day we study the map for a long time, and the colonel analyzes the course of the landing and the results achieved. Highly appreciating the importance of this naval landing operation, he said, You guys, if you stay alive, will be proud to say after the war, I participated in the Theodosia landing in December 1941. In the first half of January 1942, the Soviet troops firmly held the Kerch Peninsula. I and the lieutenant were waiting every day for the news about the beginning of a new offensive and were very worried that it would start without our participation. In the 10th of January, Veniamin Solovyov suddenly appeared in the ward. He came close to me, looked at me carefully, and extended his hand. Hello, my friend. Can I give you a hug? You won't fall apart. He hugs me gently, stroking my back. Taking a step back, he asks, Well, how are you? Will you be back in the ranks soon? At least now. I was glad. Can I get dressed? Well, so dress up right away, laughed Veniamin. You'll ruin us on bandages. All the stocks of the battalion medical center will be spent on you. Feel better a little. As soon as the bandages are removed, give me a telegram. I'll come and steal it right away. Yada. Major Andreev sent me to Feodosia, and I took advantage of the opportunity to visit you. I bombarded him with questions about the situation in the company, in the battalion, in the entire regiment, and the colonel holding out a map. Lieutenant, take a look at how far our data diverge from the true situation. Soloviev, looking at the map, remarked, Your intelligence, comrade colonel, has not quite accurate data. The front line, for example, on your map goes much further west than it really is. Getting ready to leave, Solovyev asked me sympathetic. Is the food bad, Sasha? I shook my head in the negative. Why have you lost so much weight? You could be used as an anatomy textbook. The whole skeleton is showing up. When he heard that I'd been eating tiny portions of liquid food for days, he slapped his forehead. I almost forgot, I've brought you a present. He unzipped his field bag, took out a small package and, holding it out to me, explained, Here is a piece of Krakowska and a piece of cheese. Have some refreshment. I wish you a speedy recovery. I went out to see him off. Veniaman, raising his index finger, said, Remember, Alexander, as soon as the doctors take off the bandages, scribble a few words to our field. I'll come right away. Major Andreev will be glad to scratch you out of here. Thanks, friend. I'll be sure to write, and hopefully soon. After Solovyev's departure, I waited with even greater impatience for my bandages to be removed. And during dressings, I asked the doctor hopefully, Well, comrade doctor, will you soon take off the bandages? Be patient, my dear. The old man shakes his head sadly. Something does not heal your wounds. I wish I had vitamins, but where can I get them? No. So how long will you wait? It's hard to say. The doctor divorces his hands. It depends on your body. Suddenly fascist air raids resumed. From the northwest came the deafening booms of artillery cannonade. Did ours really go on the offensive? In the evening of January 18, an old man doctor ran into the ward. On his head was not the usual white cap. Grey hair must. No comrades wounded. Lovebirds. A misfortune has happened. The commandant of the city reported that our troops, to avoid encirclement, are leaving Ferodosha. Now in the port is the last transport. If you don't catch it, you'll be captured. Hurry up, my darlings, hurry up, and I'll run to inform the others. And you, doctor, may I shout after him? He stops for a moment, waving his hand sadly. No, I'll wait for your return. The lieutenant and I started to dress. Do you guys have a gun? Asked the colonel. Leave it to me. Why do you need a gun, comrade colonel? I asked. They won't let me live. What are you saying, comrade colonel? The lieutenant was indignant. How can we leave you? Why are you silent, Sasha? He shouted at me. We'll report you, comrade colonel. I've already thought of a way. I ran out of the room and returned with a thick stick, which I had noticed even earlier. The lieutenant and I hold this stick, and you, comrade colonel, sit on it and put your arms around our shoulders. What's the matter with you, little fellows? The colonel waved his hand sadly. You can hardly stand on your own feet. Leave me, sons, save yourselves. I've won what's mine. Sincerely indignant, we reproach the colonel one after another that he is pushing us to violate the law of comradeship. All right, sons. You, the colonel, interrupts us, and a smile lights up his swarthy, gaunt face. I give up. Let's give it a try. We help him get dressed, wrapping his stumpy legs in blankets. It cost us a lot of labor to sit the heavy colonel on a stick. When we lifted him up, my neck was pierced with such a sharp pain that I staggered and could hardly hold the stick. The lieutenant's face also trembled with pain. And the agonizing journey began. My feet slipped on the coarse pebbles, each step causing pain. After walking 100 meters, we stop, put the colonel on the pebbles, and lay down next to him in exhaustion. When there were some 300 meters left to the ship, I felt that the wound in my neck opened, only to not fall, only to make it in time. We had covered another 100 meters when I staggered from the wild pain and lost consciousness. When I came to my senses, I saw the excited face of the colonel. How do you feel, son? He asked me sympathetically, meeting my gaze. Nothing. I tried to smile. The damn wound failed me. We'll go on now. No, you lie down. Colonel resolutely stopped my attempt to get up. The lieutenant will get someone to help. Soon the lieutenant and 4 sailors came running. 2 of them picked up the colonel, and the others tried to take me in their arms. I strongly resisted and moved after the colonel, supported by the sailors. When we reached the deck, a tall sailor came up to us and ordered us to carry the colonel to the ship's sick bay. The colonel, drawing us to him, said excitedly, Now thank you, sons. I wish you to live to see victory. Looking around, we saw that the ship was packed to the brim with people and equipment. Seeing that we were looking around orphaned, a skinny sailor came up to us and offered to escort us to the hold where the likely wounded were placed. We felt that without bandaging we would not survive the crossing. Putting my arm around the sailor's shoulder, I confidentially whispered to him that my comrade and I had opened wounds and asked him if we could get bandages here on the ship. "Of course you can," exclaimed the sailor. "Let's go to the infirmary." He led us to the door and opened it. We saw a spacious, well-lighted cabin. A young doctor was bent over the operating table. Without raising his head, he said something quietly to his assistants. The sailor closed the door. After a while, a sailor with a bandaged chest was carefully led out of the cabin. One of the ship's doctor's assistants ran out after the wounded man. "Take, Fyodor, a Nazi splinter as a souvenir, he offered. 10 centimeters more A, and we would have had to look for it in the right lung. And you, comrades, who are you expecting?" he asked in surprise. After listening to the sailor accompanying us, he opened the door. "Come in, please." We were helped to undress. When I was stripped of my uniform and shirt, my left shoulder was exposed, covered with fresh bloody streaks stretching from under the bandage on my neck. In an effort to cause me less pain, one of the physician's assistants carefully removed the soaked bandage and began to wash away the traces of blood around the wound. "How did you manage to tear the suture?" The doctor shook his head unhappily. After listening to the explanation, he nodded understandingly. "No wonder the suture came apart." When the new stitches were placed and the wounds were dressed, the doctor said tiredly to his assistants, "Now, as a reward for the trials endured by these guys, we will allocate them from our modest stock of 50 grams of alcohol." He gave us a friendly wink. "Now this will be the best medicine for you." The sailor who was patiently waiting for us at the door suggested, "Come on, I'll show you the entrance to the hold. You'll be warmer there." We go down carefully. Somewhere a lamp shines dimly. There are wounded lying in dense rows everywhere. After daylight, we feel blinded and stand hesitatingly at the stairs. "Now come through, comrades, to the opposite corner." "No," comes the smoky voice of some well-wisher. "There is a rope rolled up, and you will settle down on it. There are no more free places." The wounded are lying so densely that we can't avoid hitting someone we move. There were groans, outraged shouts, sprinkled with curses. We finally come across a tightly coiled rope. We put our overcoats under ourselves and stretched out on it in exhaustion. It's unbearably stuffy. I'm covered in sticky sweat. I wipe my forehead and nose with the edge of my overcoat. I'm terribly thirsty. The lieutenant is muttering something. "Are you awake, Semyon?" I ask him. 1,136 devils to the fascists. That comes the reply. 1,137 devils to the fascists. He having interrupted his strange counting, Semyon explained. I distract myself in this way, calms me down. "And on how many devils will you calm down?" "I don't know," Semyon answers uncertainly, "until I fall asleep." But neither he nor I manage to fall asleep. Unable to stand it, the lieutenant rises up and decisively declares, "You, Sasha, as you wish, but I'm going upstairs." Again accompanied by unhappy exclamations, we make our way to the exit. With difficulty, we crawl out on the deck and, having taken a few deep breaths, get drunk from the cold sea air. We stand leaning against the metal plating of the superstructure for a long time then, staggering as if drunk, we slowly approach the sailors and ask them to bring water. "Now, brothers," a dense, broad-shouldered sailor with kind eyes brought water and one dry bread each. "Do you know why we are standing?" "It is impossible to go until dawn. The water is stuffed with mines, like sausage with spike. Curiosity pushes us to the board. On one of the boat's sailors push away some horned ball with poles. I guess that it is a sea mine, and instantly forget about the cold. The first night seems especially long. When the cold overcomes us, we go down into the hold and, sitting down on the last rungs of the ladder, breathe the warm, gassy air until we begin to feel dizzy. At last the sun comes out. Its rays disperse the pre-dawn gloom. The commander carefully steers the ship. About noon, suddenly there was a commotion. Loud commands were heard. Sailors ran on the deck. The ship noticeably increased speed, opened fire, anti-aircraft guns and large-caliber machine guns. 3 Nazi planes dropped bombs. Forgetting about mines, the commander, maneuvering, throws the ship from side to side, does not give the Nazi pilots to aim. An elderly soldier, looking incredulously at the sea, then at the sky, says to his neighbor, "That's it. Airplanes bombarded us. Mines are waiting for us in the sea, and we're about to jump and get to God himself, even though we have not received an invitation from him." Well, if God didn't invite us, what the hell does he need us for? And they say the devil left our land as soon as the war started. He couldn't bear the hell here. So there is hope, Yefim Petrovich, that you and I will get to Novorossiysk alive and unharmed. Even after this assurance, Yefim Petrovich did not calm down. He stopped a passing sailor. Say, brother, is there no storm expected? There seems to be a breeze. So the sailor looked carefully around, even pulled his nose and calmed down. Don't be afraid, uncle. It's still quiet. The sea is calm. We should get there safely. Yefim Petrovich twisted his head, sighed heavily. Suddenly he sang softly in a muffled but pleasant barry. Our sea is uninhabited. Day and night it is noisy. In its fateful expanse many troubles are buried. Yefim Petrovich's neighbour, a Red Army man with an intelligent, somewhat sad face. Yefim Petrovich, don't make me sad. I like this romance very much and will listen to it with pleasure another time. And now sing something more cheerful. But Yefim Petrovich could not readjust himself. Squinting, he looked at the sea. Look around, Sergei Ilyich, he suddenly suggests. What do you see? One cold, gloomy dampness without end. And remember the storm we had when we were going to Feodosia? It was terrible. I thought we'd never reach the shore. I had never seen it before the war, but I heard that the sea is inexpressible beauty. Now I've seen this beauty. If I live, I will never come here willingly. Sergei Ilyich shakes his head disapprovingly. In Siberia, who continues Yefim Petrovich, there is no sea, only forests, and there is nothing better for me than them. When you enter a forest, the air is clean and fragrant when you breathe it in. It is not a transparency and ringing in it are extraordinary. Birches, one more beautiful than the other, one spreading, majestic, the other thin like a young girl. She stretches out her twigs to you as if inviting you to play. She rustles her leaves. To cut down such a tree would be like ruining a life, or a pine tree. They stand so important. They say they know a big secret but won't tell anyone. The tops are like gold dust warming in the sun. And how the birds sing. One bird is trying to sing in front of the other. Sergei Ilyich listens with a smile. You love the forest, Yefim Petrovich. You tell well about it. But don't cast aspersions on the sea. You've seen it at a bad time. There's a storm, or cold, dank weather when everything is grey. I think that the forest is unattractive in such weather. Yefim Petrovich waves his hand, objecting, and his neighbour, looking thoughtfully into the distance, continues. It's a pity you didn't have to see the sea on a sunny summer day. Then it competes with the sky with its beauty, brightness and purity of colours. Go to the sea in summer, you won't regret it. Warmed by the sun, we listen to the leisurely conversation of the fighters. Slumber creeps up imperceptibly and shifts our eyelids. And one more night the ship stood in the open sea. We gradually got used to the cold, but hunger made itself felt more and more strongly. The crew gave away everything they could spare from their very limited supplies. We had 2 breadcrumbs and a bowl of liquid soup each. On the 3rd day, however, we looked longingly at the familiar outlines of Novorossiysk and waited impatiently for the ship to dock.